Look at your life. Not what you show online, not what you tell people, but what it actually is. The routine, the choices, the habits, the direction. Now ask yourself something uncomfortable. Did you choose this, or did you just end up here? Because most people don't build their lives, they inherit them. From expectations, from society, from family, from fear. And over time, that borrowed life starts to feel like your own. You wake up, you follow the same routine, you make the same decisions, you chase the same goals. But something feels off. You can't explain it, you can't point to it, but it's there. A quiet feeling, like you're out of place in your own life, like you're playing a role you never auditioned for. And that's because you are. You're living a script that was written for you before you even knew who you were. Go to school, get a job, be realistic, be safe, don't take risks, don't stand out, don't fail. And you followed it, not because you wanted to, but because it was normal, because everyone else was doing it, because questioning it felt dangerous. So you didn't. You adapted. You adjusted. You became what was expected. And slowly, without realizing, you disappeared. Not physically, but mentally. Your real interests, your real desires, your real direction got buried under responsibilities, under expectations, under fear. And now, you're here, living a life that looks fine from the outside, but feels empty on the inside. Because it's not yours. It's built on what you were told, not what you chose. And that creates a conflict, a deep one, between who you are and who you've become. And that conflict, it shows up in different ways. Lack of motivation, constant distraction, restlessness, a feeling that something is missing, but you don't know what. That's not laziness, that's misalignment. Because when you're living your life, there's clarity, there's energy, there's direction. But when you're living someone else's life, there's confusion, there's doubt, there's resistance. And you feel it every day, in small ways, in quiet moments, when you're alone, when there's nothing to hide behind. You feel it. That question, is this really what I want? And most of the time, you ignore it, because facing it would require change, real change, the kind that disrupts everything, the kind that forces you to question your entire life. And that's uncomfortable. That's scary. So you avoid it. You stay busy. You stay distracted. You stay comfortable. And that becomes your life. A loop, a pattern, a routine that keeps you occupied but not fulfilled. Because deep down, you know something isn't right. You know this isn't it. You know this isn't who you're supposed to be. But you keep going, because stopping feels like losing everything. But here's the truth. You already lost something. You lost yourself in the process of becoming someone else. And until you face that, nothing changes. You'll keep living the same life, making the same choices, feeling the same emptiness. Because the problem is not your situation, it's your identity. You're living a version of yourself that was never truly yours. And the longer you stay there, the harder it becomes to leave. Because now, it's not just a life, it's your identity, your comfort zone, your reality. But that doesn't make it right. It just makes it familiar. And familiar is not the same as true. So now, you have to decide. keep living the life you were given, or start building the life you actually want, because you can't do both. And whatever you choose becomes your future. Because nobody is coming to wake you up. Nobody is coming to tell you you're living the wrong life. That realization has to come from you. And if it doesn't, you'll stay here forever, living a life that looks okay, but never feels right.
You think your choices are yours. You think your beliefs are yours. You think the way you see the world came from your own thinking, but it didn't. Not completely. Because long before you started making decisions, your mind was already being shaped, quietly, consistently, without your awareness. From the moment you were young, you were being programmed. Not in an obvious way, not like someone controlling you directly, but through repetition, through influence, through what you were told, again and again. This is success. This is failure. This is the right path. This is what you should want. And you absorbed it, without questioning, because you didn't know you were supposed to. Because when something is repeated enough, it feels like truth, even if it's not. Think about it. Why do you want the things you want? Why do you fear the things you fear? Why do you believe certain paths are safe and others are risky? Where did that come from? Was it really your decision? Or was it given to you and you accepted it? Because most people don't choose their identity. They inherit it. From parents, from school, from society, from culture, from what they see, from what they hear. And slowly, piece by piece, that builds a version of you, a mindset, a belief system, a way of thinking that feels natural, that feels like you. But it's not original. It's conditioned, programmed, installed. And that's the part you don't see, because you're living inside it. You're operating through it. So it feels real. It feels correct. It feels like your own perspective, but it's not. It's a collection of ideas that were never questioned, never challenged, never redefined. So now, you're making decisions based on a system you didn't create. You're choosing a path based on standards you didn't define. You're chasing goals based on expectations that were given to you. And that creates a problem. Because if the foundation isn't yours, the life built on top of it won't be either. That's why you feel disconnected. That's why you feel uncertain. That's why something feels off. Because deep down, there's a mismatch between who you are and who you were programmed to be. But programming is powerful. It doesn't just influence your actions. It controls your perception. It tells you what's possible, what's realistic, what's too much. And once you believe those limits, you stop pushing. You stop questioning. You stay inside the lines, because that's what you were taught. That's what feels safe. That's what feels right, even if it's not. And the most dangerous part? You don't even realize it. You think you're making your own choices. You think you're living your own life, but you're not. You're following a script that was written before you even had a voice. And unless you break that, nothing changes. You'll keep thinking the same, acting the same, choosing the same, because the system is still running, in the background, controlling everything. And the only way to break it is awareness, seeing it, recognizing it, questioning it. Because once you see it, it loses power, because now you're not blindly following, you're thinking, you're analyzing, you're choosing. And that's where freedom begins, not outside, but inside, in your mind, in your perception, in your awareness. Because once you realize that your current life is not entirely yours, you gain the power to change it. But that requires courage. The courage to question everything, the courage to challenge what you've been told, the courage to step outside what feels normal. Because normal is often programmed, and programmed is not always right. So now, you have to decide, keep following the script or start writing your own, because you can't do both. And whatever you choose becomes your reality, because nobody is coming to reprogram your mind for you. That's your responsibility. And until you take it, you'll keep living a life that feels like yours, but never truly is.
Everything looks fine. From the outside, your life makes sense. You're doing what you're supposed to do, following the path, checking the boxes, moving forward. At least, that's what it looks like. But inside, something feels off. Not broken, not completely lost, just empty. Like something is missing, but you don't know what. You try to ignore it. You stay busy. You distract yourself. You tell yourself, it's just a phase. It'll pass. It's not that serious. But it doesn't go away. It stays. Quiet, subtle, but constant. A feeling that follows you, even when everything seems okay. And that's what makes it confusing, because you're not failing, you're not struggling, you're not in a bad place. So why does it feel like this? Why does it feel like something isn't right? The answer is simple, but uncomfortable. You're not connected to your life. You're participating in it, but you're not aligned with it. Because the life you're living wasn't built from your truth. It was built from expectations, from programming, from what you were told you should want. And that creates a gap between your reality and your identity, between your actions and your purpose. And that gap feels like emptiness, because you're doing things that don't fully represent you. You're moving forward in a direction you didn't consciously choose. So even when you achieve something, it doesn't hit the same. It doesn't feel real. It doesn't feel fulfilling, because it's not connected to who you actually are. It's connected to who you were told to be. And that disconnect creates confusion, because logically, everything is fine, but emotionally, something is missing. And you can't explain it because it's not visible. It's internal. It's a lack of alignment, a lack of truth, a lack of authenticity. And without those, no matter what you achieve, it won't feel complete. Because fulfillment doesn't come from results. It comes from alignment, from knowing that what you're doing actually matters to you, that it reflects you, that it represents you. And right now, it doesn't. So your mind reacts, not loudly, not dramatically, but quietly, through emptiness, through lack of motivation, through constant distraction, through a feeling that there should be more. And that feeling is not a problem. It's a signal that something is off, that something needs to change. But most people ignore it. They push it down. They distract themselves from it, because facing it would require honesty, real honesty, the kind that forces you to admit, this isn't what I want. This isn't who I am. This isn't enough. And that's hard, because once you admit that, you can't go back. You can't pretend anymore. You can't ignore it anymore. You have to act. You have to change. You have to rebuild. And that's uncomfortable. So instead, you stay in the same life, with the same feeling,
trying to fill the emptiness with distractions, with entertainment, with temporary escapes. But nothing works, because the problem is not external, it's internal. It's the disconnect between who you are and how you're living. And until you fix that, nothing will feel right, no matter how good it looks, no matter how successful it seems. Because success without alignment feels empty. And that's where you are, right now. Not lost, not broken, just disconnected from your real self, from your real direction, from your real life. And the longer you stay here, the stronger that feeling becomes. Until one day, you can't ignore it anymore. Until one day, it becomes too loud, too real, too present. And that's when everything changes, because now you're forced to face it, to question everything, to look at your life without filters, without excuses, without distractions, and ask yourself, is this really mine? And if the answer is no, then you already know what needs to happen next, because nobody is coming to fill that emptiness for you. Nobody is coming to fix that disconnect. That's your responsibility. And until you take it, you'll keep living a life that looks full but feels empty.
You say you want change. You say you want more freedom, more control, more meaning. You say you want to live your life your way. But when the moment comes, when you actually have the chance, you hesitate, you pause, you step back, and you don't understand why. Because on the surface, it doesn't make sense. If you want something, why wouldn't you go after it? If you feel stuck, why wouldn't you change? If you know something is wrong, why wouldn't you fix it? The answer is simple. You're not just afraid of failure, you're afraid of becoming someone else. Because living your real life requires transformation, and transformation means letting go of who you've been, letting go of what you know, letting go of the identity you've built over time. And that's uncomfortable. Because even if your current life doesn't feel right, it still feels familiar, it still feels safe, it still feels like you. And stepping away from that feels like losing yourself. Because now you're entering unknown territory, a version of you that doesn't exist yet, a life that you've never lived, a path that isn't guaranteed, and that creates fear. Not because it's wrong, but because it's uncertain. And your mind hates uncertainty. It prefers stability, even if that stability is not what you want, because at least it's predictable, at least it's controlled, at least you know what to expect. But your real life, the one you actually want, doesn't come with that. It comes with risk, with discomfort, with doubt, with moments where you don't feel ready, where you don't feel confident, where you don't feel in control. And that's what stops you. Not lack of opportunity, not lack of ability, but fear. The fear of leaving what you know for something you don't. The fear of becoming someone new and not recognizing yourself. The fear of making the wrong decision and losing everything. So you stay in the same life, in the same identity, in the same routine, because it feels safer, because it feels easier, because it doesn't challenge you, but it also doesn't fulfill you. And that's the trade-off. Safety for emptiness, comfort for misalignment, predictability for a life that isn't yours. And deep down, you know it. You feel it. Every time you think about change, every time you imagine a different life, every time you ask yourself, what if? But instead of acting, you stop yourself. You create reasons, excuses, logic. I'll do it later. I need more time. I'm not ready yet. But those are not real reasons. They're protection. Protection from uncertainty, from discomfort, from transformation. Because once you start, there's no going back. Once you begin to live your real life, you can't return to the fake one. Not without feeling it, not without noticing it, not without questioning it. And that's what scares you. Because now you're responsible for your choices,
for your direction, for your life. And responsibility feels heavy, but it's also power, real power, the kind that gives you control, the kind that allows you to build something that actually belongs to you. But you have to choose it. You have to step into it, even when it feels uncomfortable, even when it feels uncertain, even when you feel like you're losing something. Because you are. You're losing the old version of yourself, the one that followed, the one that stayed safe, the one that lived someone else's life. And in its place, you're creating something new, something real, something yours. But that requires courage. Not loud courage, not dramatic courage, quiet courage. The kind that shows up in small decisions, small actions, small moments where you choose yourself over fear, over comfort, over familiarity. Because those moments, they build your future. They shape your identity. They define your life. And right now, you're at that point, that moment, where you can either stay or step forward, where you can either keep living the same life or start creating a new one. And it won't be easy. It won't feel perfect. It won't be clear all the time, but it will be real. And that's what matters. Because nobody is coming to give you your real life. You have to take it. You have to build it. You have to choose it. Even when you're afraid. Especially when you're afraid. Because fear is not a stop sign. It's a signal that you're close to something different, close to something real, close to becoming who you're supposed to be. But only if you move, only if you act, only if you stop letting fear decide your life. Because if you don't, you'll stay here forever, living a life that feels safe, but never truly yours.
It didn't happen all at once. You didn't wake up one day and suddenly feel like a stranger to yourself. It was slower than that, quieter than that, almost invisible. At first, it was just small changes, small compromises, small decisions, things that didn't feel important at the time, things you told yourself, it's not a big deal. It doesn't matter that much. I'll fix it later. And you moved on. You kept going. You kept adjusting. You kept adapting. Because that's what life requires, right? That's what you were told. Be flexible. Be realistic. Do what you have to do. So you did. But every time you adjusted, you gave up something. Not everything, just a small part. A small piece of who you were. Your interests, your ideas, your direction, your voice. And you didn't notice because it was gradual, because it was justified, because it felt necessary. But over time, those small pieces, they added up. They changed you. Not drastically, but consistently. Until one day, you paused. You looked at yourself, your life, your choices, and something felt off. Not because everything was wrong, but because something was missing. Something familiar. Something important. Something you. And that's when it hits. You've changed. Not intentionally, not consciously, but gradually, through patterns, through habits, through repeated decisions that moved you further and further away from who you used to be, from who you could have been. And now, you're here, living a life that works, that functions, that looks okay, but doesn't feel like yours.
because the person living it is not fully you. It's a version of you, built from compromises, built from expectations, built from survival, not from truth. And that's why it feels strange. Because deep down, you remember. You remember who you were, what you wanted, what you cared about, what excited you, what made you feel alive. But that version feels distant now, almost like a memory, like someone you used to know, but don't anymore. And that creates tension, a quiet tension, between who you are now and who you used to be, and who you could be. And that tension, it doesn't go away. It stays in the background, in your thoughts, in your emotions, in those moments where everything slows down and you feel it, that disconnect, that gap, that feeling that this isn't me. But instead of facing it, you keep moving, you keep going, you keep telling yourself, this is just how life is. This is what I have to do. This is normal. But normal is not always right. And just because something works doesn't mean it's true. Because you didn't become this person by choice. You became this person by default, by going with the flow, by following the path, by not questioning, by not resisting. And that's how identity drift happens. Not through big decisions, but through small ones, repeated, over time, until they reshape you completely. And now, you're at a point where you don't fully recognize yourself, not externally, but internally. You feel it in how you think, in how you react, in what you do. It's different, less aligned, less intentional, less real. And that's not a failure. It's a signal that you've drifted, that you've moved away from your true direction. But here's the truth. Just because you drifted doesn't mean you're lost. It just means you need to realign, to reconnect, to rebuild, to come back to yourself. But that requires awareness, honesty, and action. Because you can't go back by pretending everything is fine. You can't fix it by ignoring it. You can't change it by staying the same. You have to face it fully, without excuses, without distractions, without running from it. Because the longer you avoid it, the further you drift, the more disconnected you become, the harder it is to come back. And one day, if you wait too long, you might not even remember who you were supposed to be. And that's the real loss. Not time, not opportunities, but identity. Because once you lose that, everything else loses meaning. So now, you have to decide. Keep drifting, or start returning. Keep becoming someone else, or start becoming yourself. Because you can't do both. And whatever you choose becomes your life. Because nobody is coming to bring you back to yourself. That's your responsibility. And the moment you take it, everything begins to change. Slowly, but surely. Back to something real. Back to something true. Back to you.
You felt it before. That moment. That quiet realization. This isn't right. This isn't what I want. This isn't who I'm supposed to be. And for a second, you wake up. You see clearly. You question everything. Your path, your decisions, your life. And in that moment, you want to change. You want something different, something real, something that actually feels like yours. But then, time passes. Days go by. The feeling fades. And you go back to the same routine, back to the same choices, back to the same life. And later,
You find yourself in the same place again, asking the same questions, feeling the same emptiness, and wondering, why does this keep happening? Why can't I change? Why do I keep ending up here? The answer is not what you think. It's not lack of discipline. It's not lack of motivation. It's not that you don't want better. It's deeper than that. It's pattern. A pattern you didn't create consciously, but one you keep repeating because it feels familiar, because it feels safe, because it feels like you, even if it's not what you want. That's the trap. You don't choose your life based on what's best for you. You choose it based on what feels known, what feels predictable, what feels controlled. And your mind, it prioritizes that over everything else, because your mind doesn't care about your potential. It cares about your safety. And safety is found in familiarity. So even when you know something is wrong, even when you feel the misalignment, even when you want something different, your mind pulls you back to what it recognizes, back to what it understands, back to what it can control. And that's why you repeat the same decisions, the same mistakes, the same patterns, over and over again. Because change feels like risk, feels like uncertainty, feels like losing control. And your mind resists that. So it creates reasons, excuses, logic to keep you where you are. This is more realistic. This is safer. This makes sense. And you listen because it sounds reasonable, because it feels logical. But it's not truth. It's protection. Protection from the unknown. Protection from discomfort. Protection from becoming something new. And that protection keeps you stuck. Because every time you have a chance to change, you don't take it. Not fully, not completely. You hesitate, you overthink, you delay, and eventually you return to what you know, to what you've always done. And that becomes your life, a loop, a cycle, a pattern that keeps repeating because it was never broken. And patterns don't break on their own. They require awareness. They require action. They require you to go against what feels natural. Because what feels natural right now is the problem. It's the pattern. It's the cycle. It's the thing keeping you in the same place. So if you want something different, you have to choose something different, even when it feels uncomfortable, even when it feels wrong, even when it doesn't feel like you. Because that's the sign that you're breaking the pattern, that you're stepping outside the loop, that you're creating something new. But most people don't do that. They stay, they repeat, they continue, because it's easier, because it's familiar, because it doesn't require change. But easy doesn't lead to growth. Familiar doesn't lead to transformation. And staying the same doesn't lead to a different life. So now you have to decide, stay in the loop or break it. Keep choosing the same life or choose something new. Because you can't have both. And whatever you choose becomes your reality. Because nobody is coming to break your patterns for you. Nobody is coming to change your decisions for you. Nobody is coming to choose your life for you. That's your responsibility. And until you take it, you'll keep ending up in the same place, with the same feeling, with the same question. Why am I still here? And the answer will always be the same. Because you chose to stay, even when you knew you didn't belong there.
There's a voice inside you. Not loud, not aggressive, not demanding, but consistent, always there, in the background, quietly, telling you things you don't want to hear. This isn't right. This isn't what you want. You can do more than this. You're meant for something different. And you hear it. You've heard it before, many times, in quiet moments, Late at night, when everything slows down, when there's no distraction, no noise, no escape, that voice, it becomes clear, sharp, honest, real. And for a moment, you listen, you feel it, you believe it, you think, this is it. This is what I need to change. This is what I've been avoiding. But then something happens. You don't act. You don't move. You don't follow it. Instead, you go back to your routine, back to your comfort, back to your current life. And that voice gets quieter. Not because it disappeared, but because you ignored it again and again and again. And over time, you stop trusting it. Not because it's wrong, but because you don't follow it. And that creates distance between you and your real direction, your real path, your real calling. Because your calling doesn't force you. It doesn't control you. It doesn't demand action. It invites you. It shows you. It guides you. But it doesn't push you. And that's why it's easy to ignore. Because following it requires something from you. Courage, risk, change. The kind of change that disrupts your entire life. The kind of change that makes you uncomfortable. The kind of change that forces you to leave behind what you know. And that's scary. Because your current life, even if it's not right, still feels safe, still feels predictable, still feels controlled. But your calling doesn't come with that. It comes with uncertainty, with doubt, with moments where you don't feel ready, where you don't feel confident, where you don't feel sure. And your mind, it resists that. It prefers logic, stability, security, so it overrides your calling. It tells you, this is not realistic, this is too risky, this is not the right time. And you listen because it sounds smart, because it sounds responsible, because it sounds like the right decision. But deep down, you know it's not. You feel it, that quiet discomfort, that subtle tension, that feeling that you're not doing what you're supposed to do. But you keep going, because ignoring your calling is easier than following it, because following it requires you to become someone else, to think differently, to act differently, to live differently. And that's hard. So instead, you stay in a life that doesn't fully fit you, in a path that doesn't fully represent you, in a version of yourself that isn't complete. And that creates conflict, internal conflict, between what you're doing and what you feel you should be doing. And that conflict, it doesn't go away. It builds, it grows, it becomes stronger over time, until one day it becomes too loud to ignore, too real to deny, too present to avoid. And that's when everything changes, because now you can't pretend anymore. You can't distract yourself anymore. You can't ignore that voice anymore, because it's no longer quiet. It's clear, direct, unavoidable. And now you have to choose. Keep ignoring it or finally listen, because you can't do both, not forever. At some point, you have to decide, because your calling will not wait forever. It will not keep showing up if you keep ignoring it. It will fade, not completely, but enough that you stop hearing it clearly. And once that happens, you lose direction, you lose clarity, you lose connection to what you're meant to do. And that's the real danger. Not failure, not risk, but disconnection from yourself, from your purpose, from your real life. So now, you have to ask yourself, how many times have you ignored it? How many times have you felt it and did nothing? How many times have you chosen comfort over truth? Because every time you do that, you move further away from something that matters, from something real, from something that could change everything.
but only if you follow it, only if you act, only if you listen and do something about it. Because nobody is coming to push you towards your calling. Nobody is coming to force you to follow it. That's your responsibility. And if you don't take it, you'll keep living a life that feels incomplete, that feels off, that feels like something is missing, because something is. Your real direction, your real path, your real life. And the only way to find it is to stop ignoring the voice that's been trying to guide you all along.
You've seen it now. You've felt it. You've realized something isn't right. This life doesn't fully belong to you. And that realization, it changes everything. Because now, you can't pretend anymore. You can't ignore it anymore. You can't go back to being unaware. Because once you see it everywhere. In your routine, in your decisions, in your habits, in your direction. You feel the disconnect, constantly. And that's where the real challenge begins. Not in realizing it, but in changing it. Because awareness is just the beginning. Breaking free is the real work. And it's not easy. Because you're not just changing your actions. You're changing your identity. The way you think. The way you decide. The way you live. And that requires something most people avoid. Disruption. You have to disrupt your patterns, your habits, your routine. The things that feel normal. Because your current normal is the problem. It's what's keeping you here. So if you want something different, you have to break it. Not slowly, not comfortably, but intentionally. Because small awareness, without action, changes nothing. So where do you start? Not with everything. Not with your entire life. You start with control. Control over your decisions. Because right now, most of your decisions are automatic. You wake up. You follow the same routine. You react the same way. You choose the same path. Without thinking. Without questioning. And that's the loop. So the first step is to interrupt it. Pause. Before you act. Before you decide. Before you follow the pattern. Ask yourself, is this what I actually want? Or, is this what I'm used to? That question, it breaks the autopilot. It forces awareness. It forces choice. And choice is where change begins. Then, you shift your actions. Not dramatically, but deliberately. Do something different. Even if it feels uncomfortable. Even if it feels wrong. Even if it doesn't feel like you. Because your current you is built from the old pattern. So anything new will feel unfamiliar. That's normal. That's expected. That's necessary. Because you're not just changing what you do. You're changing who you are. And that takes time. It takes repetition. It takes consistency. Because identity is built through actions. Repeated. Over time. So every time you choose differently, you build something new. A new version of yourself. A new direction. A new life. But it won't feel right immediately. It won't feel natural. It won't feel comfortable. And that's where most people stop. They go back. Back to what feels normal. Back to what feels easy. Back to what they know. But you can't do that. Not if you want something real. Because going back means staying the same. And staying the same means staying disconnected. So you keep going. Even when it feels off. Even when it feels uncertain. Even when it feels like you're not sure what you're doing. Because clarity doesn't come before action. It comes after. Through experience. Through trial. Through movement. And that's what you need. Movement. Not perfection. Not certainty. Movement. Because movement breaks the pattern. Movement creates new paths. Movement
leads to something different. And over time, that difference grows. It becomes clearer, stronger, more aligned, until one day, you look at your life again, and it feels different. Not perfect, but real. Not easy, but yours. Because now, you're not following, you're choosing. You're not reacting, you're deciding. You're not living someone else's life, you're building your own. And that's the shift. From passive to intentional. From programmed to aware. From stuck to moving. But it requires commitment, daily commitment, to choose differently, to act differently, to think differently. Because one moment is not enough. One decision is not enough. It has to become your pattern, your habit, your identity, your identity. And that's how you break free. Not all at once, but step by step, decision by decision, action by action, until the old life no longer fits, and the new one starts to take shape. Because nobody is coming to pull you out of the wrong life. Nobody is coming to rebuild your identity for you. Nobody is coming to give you the life you actually want. That's your responsibility. And the moment you accept that, you stop waiting and start building something real, something aligned, something yours. And that's where everything changes. Because now, you're not just living, you're creating. And that's the difference between a life that feels empty and a life that feels real.
There's a moment, a heavy, quiet moment, where everything becomes clear. Not in a loud way, not in a dramatic way, but in a way you can't ignore. You look at your life, and something clicks. Not a small realization, not a passing thought, but something deeper. Something that hits you at your core. This isn't it. Not just this isn't perfect, not just this could be better, but this was never meant for me. And that realization, it changes everything. Because now you're not just dissatisfied, you're aware. Aware that the life you're living was never yours to begin with. It was built, designed, structured around expectations, around what you were told you should want, not what you actually needed, not what actually fits you. And for a long time, you followed it, you trusted it, you believed it, because it was normal, because it made sense, because everyone else was doing it. But now, you see the truth. And the truth is uncomfortable, because it means you've been living a life that doesn't belong to you. You've been investing your time, your energy, your attention into something that was never aligned with who you are. And that realization, it hurts. Not because it's wrong, but because it's real. Because it forces you to face something you've been avoiding. The fact that you've been living on autopilot, following a path you didn't question, building a life you didn't fully choose. And now you can't unsee it. You can't go back to being unaware. You can't pretend everything is fine, because now you know. You know this isn't it. You know this isn't enough. You know this isn't yours. And that creates a conflict, a deep one, between what you've built and what you actually want, between what you've become and who you could be. And that conflict, it's not easy to deal with, because it requires something from you, a decision, a real decision, not a small one, not a comfortable one, but one that changes everything. Because once you accept that this life isn't yours, you can't stay the same. You can't keep moving the same way. You can't keep making the same choices. Because now you're aware of the gap. And awareness creates responsibility. Responsibility to change.
responsibility to act, responsibility to move in a different direction. And that's where most people stop, because awareness is uncomfortable, but action is even harder. Because action means risk. It means uncertainty. It means leaving behind what you've built, what you know, what feels safe, even if it's not right. And that's the challenge, to choose truth over comfort, to choose alignment over familiarity, to choose your real life over the one you were given. Because you can't have both. You can't stay here and expect to feel fulfilled. You can't keep living this life and expect it to suddenly become yours. It won't, because it was never built for you. It was built for a version of you that followed, that adapted, that accepted. But that version is not who you are anymore. Not after this realization, not after this awareness. Because now you see yourself differently. You see your life differently. You see your direction differently. And that changes everything. Because now you have a choice. Continue living a life that isn't yours, or start building one that is. But understand this, it won't be easy. It won't be clear. It won't be perfect, but it will be real. And that's what matters. Because a real life, even if it's difficult, feels better than a comfortable one that doesn't belong to you. So now you have to decide. Stay in a life that feels wrong but safe, or step into something unknown but real. Because you can't avoid this anymore. Not after seeing it, not after feeling it, not after realizing that you were never meant to live like this. And the longer you stay, the harder it becomes to leave. The more you invest, the more you feel stuck. The more you delay, the more you lose. Not just time, but identity. Because every day you stay, you move further away from who you actually are. And one day, if you wait too long, you might not recognize yourself at all. And that's the real loss. Not failure, not mistakes, but living a life that was never yours until it becomes permanent. So don't. Not anymore. Not after this. Because now you know. And knowing is enough. Enough to question. Enough to act. Enough to change. Because nobody is coming to give you your real life. You have to take it. And it starts with one decision: to stop living a life that was never meant for you.
There's a moment, quiet, still, almost invisible, where everything stops. Not outside, but inside. The noise fades, the distractions disappear, the excuses lose their power, and for the first time, you're left with nothing but truth. No filters, no justification, no denial. Just you and your life, exactly as it is. And in that moment, you see it, clearly, completely, without distortion. This life you've been living, it's not yours, not fully, not honestly, not completely. And instead of avoiding it, this time you accept it. Not emotionally, not dramatically, but calmly, cold, honest. This isn't my life. And that sentence, it changes everything. Because now you're not confused, you're not guessing, you're not questioning. You know. And knowing creates clarity. And clarity creates power. Because now you're not reacting anymore, you're deciding. And that's where the shift happens.
not in your circumstances, not in your environment, but in your identity. Because the version of you that accepted this life, that followed this path, that ignored that voice, that version can't exist anymore. It doesn't fit. Not after what you've realized, not after what you've seen, not after what you've felt. So it has to go. Not slowly, not partially, completely. Because you can't build something real while holding on to something false. It doesn't work. You can't live your life while carrying someone else's identity. So you let it go. The expectations, the labels, the version of you that was built from programming, from fear, from comfort, from approval, you drop it. Not because it's easy, but because it's necessary. Because now you understand something deeper. You understand that your life is not something you inherit, it's something you choose, daily, through your actions, through your decisions, through your direction. And if you don't choose it, someone else will. Something else will. And that's how you end up living a life that isn't yours. But not anymore. Not after this. Because now you're aware. Now you're conscious. Now you're in control. And control changes everything. Because now, when you wake up, you don't just follow, you choose. When you make decisions, you don't just react, you decide. When you think about your future, you don't just hope, you build. And that's the rebirth. Not loud, not dramatic, but real. Because it's built from truth, from awareness, from choice. And over time, that new version of you starts to take shape. Not perfect, not complete, but aligned. More real, more intentional, more yours. And that's what you've been missing. Not success, not opportunity, not ability, but alignment. And now you have it. Not fully, but enough. Enough to move forward, enough to act, enough to build something different, something that reflects you, something that belongs to you. But it requires consistency, because one decision is not enough. One moment is not enough. It has to become your pattern, your identity, the way you operate, every day. Because your old life, it will try to pull you back. The habits, the routine, the comfort, the familiarity. It will call you. It will try to bring you back, because it's easy, because it's known, because it doesn't require effort. But now you see it. Now you recognize it. Now you can choose differently. And that's the difference between staying and evolving, between existing and living, between following and becoming. Because now you're not just living a life, you're creating one, consciously, intentionally, deliberately. And that changes everything. Because now your life is not something you fell into, it's something you built. And that means it's real, it's yours, it's aligned. And that's what you've been missing. Not success, not opportunity, not ability, but alignment. And now you have it. Not fully, but enough. Enough to move forward, enough to act, enough to build something different, something that reflects you, something that belongs to you.